Money.
Money.
Money. Money is a particularly interesting subject for the Iranians currently here. Why is that?
Sanctions.
Sanctions. What does that mean?
Economic restrictions.
Yeah.
Economic restrictions.
Actually, we are not the only nations that you in sanctions now. Russians also are. And yes,
So we have Russians and Iranians here, both of which are under sanctions, economic blocks that essentially do what? Prevent you from using your money, prevent you from buying or selling things. But if you're outside of Iran, you can't access your Iranian bank account, right?
yes.
And it is
And also, we cannot have for example, other countries' bank account.
Yeah, it's very difficult for you to set up a bank account in another country. So essentially, you are limited to just whatever cash you can carry with you if you travel in a foreign country. Obviously makes living very difficult, right? What a very efficient way to control people, make it incredibly difficult for them to participate in the economy.
Yeah.
I don't have to throw you in a prison cell if I make it virtually impossible for you to live the way you want, except under the rules that I allow for you, that I set for you. Obviously, your life is made much more difficult than it needs to be by limiting your access to money, right? Your ability to make money, your ability to spend money. How does that work? What is money? What are they limiting by limiting your ability to make or spend money?
Kind of limit me to think. I cannot even thinking without money.
You can't think without money? Explain that. I'm thinking right now and I'm not spending any money.
I cannot thinking about the ideas. For example, we had the volunteer here, Mustafa. He could speak in English good, I think, but he couldn't be a teacher in online websites to teach others because the nationality was Iranian. But for a lot of people, they can thinking about like, what if I can teach online? What if, like, you are from all the sides blocked, so you are kind of, you figure out like better to not think, because even if I think,
You're saying that you have so few options that you can't even consider what options you have because almost all of them are unavailable to you. That's what you mean.
exactly.
You don't mean that you literally cannot think without spending money. Someone with a professional skill set, you gave the example of an Iranian who speaks English well and teaches English well, will have very, very limited options for employing that skill set to make money in the international job market, right? And maybe it has nothing to do necessarily with the fact that he's from Iran. I mean, unless people just don't want to hire teachers from Iran for some reason, whether valid or not, but because he cannot even create an account with websites that would allow such a thing because he has no way to get paid, right? He has no way to collect the money because he can't have a bank account, right? So you have a capable provider of a valuable skill who is unable to effectively exchange that skill in the economy, right? So it's not that he cannot speak English, it's not that he cannot teach English, he can do both of those things, it's just very, very difficult to organize such things in a way that he is rewarded with currency for doing those things. They haven't forbid him from speaking or teaching English, right? They're not going to say, they're not saying we'll kill you or arrest you if you speak English, right? Yeah. That would be one very direct, very violent way of controlling someone, right? But if instead they just make it nearly impossible to collect currency for doing something, or to offer currency for something you want, the result is basically the same, right? What is currency? What is money? What is the thing we keep talking about?
Your life will stop actually.
Your life will stop if you don't have money?
Yeah.
No, your life wouldn't stop, but it's the quality of this life would be so low.
Why?
Oh, you.
Because if you didn't have a place to stay, for example, you need to live on the street, and if you can,
Why does having money mean you have a place to stay? What's the relationship between those two things?
Because you have to pay for the,
Why?
because somebody for that things wants money.
Why?
Because
What do you think my next question is going to be?
why they need money?
Well, you're all staying in my house and none of you are paying me money. How did that happen?
Huh?
How did that happen? You said that if you're going to stay in someone else's house, live in someone else's house, they want money. Yet you're all living in my house and not paying me money. So maybe should you start paying me money? Is that what you're saying? That you want to start paying me? Huh? Why do people who have houses to live in generally want money in exchange for the opportunity to live in their houses or apartments or whatever living situation?
Because they can use this money for another things, for their needs. They need something that if they get money, because they let us to stay, they can get something else. If a person who renting his house or flat or apartment, getting money, they can buy the car.
Why?
Why they want to?
Because the person who has the car wants money for the car, yes? There's a very important distinction that we're slowly getting to here. And the distinction is between wealth and money. Because the single biggest economic fallacy that almost every person on earth commits is thinking that wealth is money and money is wealth. And they're not the same thing at all. In fact, it is very, very possible and very common, in fact, for someone to make more money than someone else, but still have a lot less wealth, depending on the circumstances under which they make and spend that money. Because all money is, at the end of the day, is a way to exchange wealth. It's an accounting system. Wealth is the things that you buy and sell with money, that you exchange, right? Valuable things.
What is wealth actually?
That, yes, what is wealth? Good question. That's the foundation of economics. What is wealth? And again, this is like step one, and almost everybody gets it wrong. It's like imagine if every person in the world, every person who claimed to be a physicist didn't know what force and mass were. Like, could you do any physics if you didn't understand those basic terms, if you couldn't tell what those were? All money is just a number. It's a numerical system. It's a way of keeping track of things. But it's the things you're keeping track of that are actually valuable. Money itself intrinsically has no value. You can't do anything with money except acquire other things.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay? And the things you acquire, you do so because you find them valuable in some way, right? Everything you ever willingly spend money on, and anything anyone would ever give you money for, why are they doing that? Again, assuming it's willing and not putting a gun to someone's head or something, right? We give examples of a place to live and a car, or somebody offering English lessons online. All of those are examples of offering something somebody finds valuable, right? Mm-hmm. What is value?
Basic questions.
Yes.
Basic.
Basic questions, things we all think about and talk about regularly throughout our lives, but very few people actually stop to think about what they mean.
Actually, this is the first time in my life. So probably in my life, I have some goals
Why do you want a car, Amir?
as a house and as things to travel with.
Are the things you would spend money on the same things necessarily that I would spend money on? Or some other random person down the street,
Not necessarily.
right? In a very broad sense, like food, transportation, shelter, yes, but beyond just the most broad level of analysis, no, they're quite different, right? People tend to want very different things very unique and personal to them, right? They value things differently. What does that mean when we say that they value things differently?
they put a different level of preferences in
Yes.
the
Okay.
different things.
Preference, which is another way of saying like satisfaction or the amount of happiness it brings them. I prefer the term satisfaction. Happiness seems kind of shallow and fleeting because you can do things that make you feel satisfied but don't make you happy. You see what I mean? Satisfaction is a level deeper than happiness, right? So, what you value is what makes you feel satisfied. It's your conception of what will ease a state of wanting. When you want something you don't have, you feel dissatisfied in some way, right? Some kind of negative emotion that incentivizes you to take action to acquire the thing that you perceive will satisfy that negative state. Yes?
Yes.
That's value. That's every choice you ever make. Remember, we've had this conversation before. Every choice you ever make is an economic choice.
Yeah.
And money, rather than being the foundation of that, is actually just one very, very distant tool that is often useful for facilitating that process. But money means nothing without first having things that bring actual value to people. Products and services of various kinds, actual physical objects or activities. This cat brings me a lot of satisfaction. Are you unsatisfied? How much would you pay for me to let you go right now?
A bunch.
So how is it possible that some people who make a lot more money than other people can have a lot less wealth? For instance, it is common in parts of the West, parts of America, parts of Canada, parts of Western Europe, for people to make $100,000 or more. That's not even considered rich anymore. That used to be like the goal. Six figures, we call it 100,000, 6 digits. There was a time, I think when I was growing up, that was considered like a really high, impressive goal. It's not millionaire level. Millionaire is 7 figures, but it's still, if you were making 6 figures, it's like, wow, okay, you're doing pretty well, you know? In the 90s, I think that was considered a lot of money when I was growing up. And now it is, you know, not everyone makes that much, but it is not uncommon for people to make $100,000 a year or more and still barely have enough money to pay for their basic cost of living, as we call it, to pay for their place to live, food, transportation, basic recreation, and have no money left over at the end of the month. Is that person wealthy?
No.
No, the person.
They spend as they earn.
In Armenia, if you made $100,000 a year, you'd be pretty darn wealthy, right? Why?
Because the basic lifestyle in Armenia is like, I don't know, per month maybe 2,000. So it's like a
$2,000? You think the average Armenian makes $2,000 a month?
Yes, not. Yes, less. Less. 500? I don't know.
Yeah,
Something like
in Yerevan, maybe 1,000 is considered a good salary. I think 1,000 a month. But in the smaller towns and villages, no, definitely less than that. Maybe like 300 to 500 a month.
Yeah, so they can live with the kind of 10,000 a year, each year.
Yeah.
But 100,000 is like yeah, if they get it in one, like today, they can live it. They can live 10 years without working and pay like thinking about something. 10 years.
So,
Yeah.
how is it possible? The same number, right? The number hasn't changed. It's exactly identical. You can write the number down and it will not change. $100,000. Is that a lot of money? Yes or no? How do you answer that question, whether that's a lot of money or not? What's the analysis you're using
It
there?
depends on the place. Because, for example, somewhere in Northern Europe, like Finland or Scandinavian country, where prices are really high for everything, like for housing, for food, for I don't know, recreation, restaurants, and something. The prices are so high, so it would be not so much money
Right.
if we compare the two.
So, but it's the same amount of money. The number has not changed. What has changed?
Local prices.
In other words, the amount of value you are getting for that fixed numerical dollar sign, right? It's not the $100,000. It's the what you're getting in return for the $100,000, right? Is it enough to rent a shitty apartment or a really nice big mansion? Is it enough to buy really, really basic food that will barely keep you alive or fancy gourmet dinners every night? That's the value you're receiving from that. If we're asking if that's a lot of money, we're not actually asking about the amount of money. We're asking, does it equate to a large amount of value?
I think in the not so wealthy European countries they do, like Greece or something.
Yeah, definitely. But and
Because you really can't compare, for example, Greece to the Norway, because it's totally different
eating.
wealth levels.
No. So what about the milk? For example, here in milk, like super cheap. And
I gave that example once in a video that Ellie took. Remember, after we bought a few liters of fresh, raw, organic cow milk off one of the neighbors for like $1 or something. And I made the comment because I grew up in Southern California, which is full of hippies who buy really expensive, fancy, organic food. You know, do you know the chain store Whole Foods? It's kind of infamous in America. It's this really expensive gourmet health food chain that's all over places like California. Some people joke that it should be called Whole Paycheck. And so he went to a place like that and tried to buy a few liters of fresh, raw, organic, and grass-fed cow milk and be like $10 or more. I don't even know. Like I haven't lived in California in a long time, but it used to. I'm sure it's even more expensive now than it was when I lived there, right? I used to do sales for some of these companies. I would do product demonstrations and sales for various really expensive, esoteric, hippie health foods. So I learned a lot about how people evaluate these things and how they spend money on these things. And the point is, it would be 10 to 20 times the price there probably for the same thing, right? The same commodity, the same product. Milk in an identical state of being, there would be 10 times the price at least.
Why?
Right? Why? If you understand that, again, this is the foundational economic fallacy that almost everyone makes, and that's what prevents them from ever accumulating any significant amount of wealth. And remember what I mean by wealth. I don't mean money. Is that money is not wealth, it's a representation of wealth, and it's up to you to use money in a way that turns it into the highest amount of wealth you can manage to turn it into. And there are only two ways to do that. One is that you start making more money so that you can spend more of it, or you spend it in smarter ways that equate to more wealth. And if you do both of those, great. Like if you can make more money and spend it in smarter ways that equate to more wealth, great. But even if you made still just the same amount, even if you made just an average salary wherever you're from, even if you weren't making what most people would consider a lot of money, but you spent it 10 times smarter than almost everyone around you, you would very quickly accumulate much more real wealth than the average person does. You could even accumulate wealth faster than someone who makes much more money than you do. Because the person who makes $100,000 a year but cannot exchange that $100,000 for lots of actual significant wealth, like if it's just covering their living expenses, they're not rich. They're rich on paper is the term we use. Like you could write down a number and say, oh, that's a large number. But again, if you realize wealth is not the number, it's not the numerical representation, it's the actual stuff that brings value to your life, then they're not wealthy at all. But someone who might make half as much as them, if they're spending their money on things that bring them actual value, wealth, right? Particularly in ways that last a long time, or even things that grow over time, appreciate in value, that person naturally just becomes wealthy the longer time goes on. What we call the cost of living is a way of saying satisfying your necessary short-term needs. Food, a place to sleep, recreation, right? Those are all things we need in the short term, like your recurring needs we all have. And until somebody hacks our biology to the point where we don't need to eat or sleep, like those are things all people will always have to deal with in some form, right? And they're satisfied when you eat. You just ate a meal, so now you're not hungry anymore. But hey, tomorrow morning, you're gonna be hungry again, right? You're gonna have to do something to satisfy that need, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to forms of value that might last our whole lives, or at least several years, like that table that you ate your meal on. I think that was somewhere between $300 and $500. I don't remember. I bought it a few years ago. It's a decent table, I would say. Wouldn't you agree? It's not the cheapest. Like, this is a pretty cheap table right here. This was very cheap. This was less than 100, I think. That one's a bit nicer. It's a step above. Very well constructed, aesthetically pleasing. That's a table that might last me my entire life, right? It's conceivable that table could last 50 years or more, right? So I spent $300, let's say, on that table for 50 years of service.
Yeah.
For 50 years of having a table. Is that a good economic exchange? Did I get a lot of value from that?
Definitely.
And what if I'd spent that $300 on taking a few of my friends out for a night of sushi? That's not unreasonable, right? Sushi can be really expensive, right?
Yeah.
Would it be a great night? Maybe. Yeah, it might be the best sushi I've ever had, right? But I will eat it, I will digest it, and the value, both in terms of the nutrition it gives me and the sensory experience of eating it, will be gone very quickly after eating it, right? So one night of feeling good from eating sushi, 50 years of having a decent table. What's a better exchange of the same $300? Which one gives me more value?
The table. Definitely.
Of course, I don't need infinite tables. So I can't just, every time I get $300, buy another table. More tables, I need more tables. It's the only way to get wealthy, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? I need other things too. And I do have to eat. It doesn't have to be $300 sushi every night, but I do have to eat something, right? And I do have aesthetic preferences, sensory experiences that to me might be worth more money than others. I buy expensive coffee, for instance. Why? Because to me, paying twice as much for coffee that to me is 10 times as valuable is a good economic exchange. It tastes better, it gives me more energy, I'm more creative, I write things better, right? Like it makes me more productive. Is that worth paying twice as much compared to the cheaper coffee I could be buying? For me, yes. For another person who doesn't like coffee, or maybe only likes coffee a little bit and couldn't appreciate some coffees are better than others, right? Probably not. The eternal economic question facing all modern humans since the invention of currency, and of course these things applied even before we had money, because it's really just about how we make choices, but currency, money, is a way to facilitate making choices more efficiently. If you have money, however much of it you have, relatively little or a lot, what is the smartest way you can spend it to derive the maximum long-term value? Right, so you don't have to think of this in conventional terms like banking and stocks and certificates and precious metals and all the conventional investing terms. Again, an investment is simply a way to spend money that delivers long-term or growing, increasing value to you. Why is it that some of our neighbors who are much more skilled with tools than I am, and even than you are in some ways, don't own very many tools? Why haven't they invested some of their currency into tools like hammers and saws and drills and so forth? And why am I calling it an investment instead of saying just spending money on hammers and draws and hammers and saws and drills.
Sitting with it.
What can they do? They can do something. What is the something they do?
They can earn money with.
Well, no, I didn't say they can earn money necessarily, even if they can't. Like, obviously, conceivably, they could if they could build something and charge money for it. But even if they didn't charge money for it, what could they still do with it? Let's say that for the sake of argument, it's impossible for them to charge money with anything they would build with their tools. Could they still do something valuable with their tools?
They can do something for themselves.
And for other
Like
people.
a table or
Yeah,
something.
they could build a table that normally you'd have to spend $300 to buy in a store, maybe. Right?
Yeah. Or even they can have a cooperation between the people village and have a few to or a complete workshop. Like your workshop is kind of complete. So and everybody use this and it's like for everybody. Now almost you are the source of the tools. They take it without paying something to you.
A tool is not something necessarily that gives pleasure or satisfaction directly, like when I was talking about recreation before. You're eating right now. With every bite you take, it's giving you satisfaction immediately, right? But some things that we go to great effort to do or acquire or spend a lot of money on are not things that immediately make us happy or give us satisfaction. A drill by itself, unless you think of it as like a toy or something, doesn't give you immediate satisfaction. It's something you do with the drill later, several steps ahead in the process that ultimately results in something satisfying and therefore valuable. If I want to fix a broken fence and I consider the fence valuable, then I will probably need some tools that can help me do that. If I want to build a table because I consider the table valuable, having a place to sit and eat meals is satisfying for me. A drill and a saw and all the other things I need to make a table are tools that will help me acquire that outcome. Right? So again, it's not the tools themselves that are making me happy. It's the things I'm doing with them that the state they eventually lead to that makes me happy. Right? So you have to be able to think a little bit ahead, a few steps at least in the process to see, oh, this drill's $100. I don't want to lose $100. Think of how much food and cigarettes and beer I could buy with $100 that would make me happy. And if you can think far enough ahead in the future, okay, I don't want to lose this $100 right now, but if this drill works for 5 years, which I think is pretty reasonable expectation of the lifetime of a drill with moderate use, right? How many other valuable things might I do with that drill? And I don't mean necessarily will I be able to make money with the drill, though that's certainly one possibility. I might just be able to build a lot of things that I consider valuable or fix things as they're breaking that I consider valuable. Yeah, save money on things I would have had to buy from someone else, either a large manufacturer in a grocery store or a department store, or just from someone else who has the tools that can make these things for me, right? That's it. That's the entirety of economics. How do I make better, longer-term choices about how I exchange the things I have that I consider valuable for other things that I will consider more valuable? That's it. That's the entirety of economics. Money, currency, is just a numerical accounting system to make that easier. Because with money, some guy working in a factory in China for a daily wage contributes to the production of a metal widget that I need for some reason that I pay a few dollars for. He gets paid, the other people in the factory get paid, the owner of the factory gets paid, and I get my little metal widget that I need for whatever random purpose I have, right? Who built this camera? Sony. The Sony company built this camera. How many people are employed by Sony to make this camera?
thousand different.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them obviously are directly involved in the making of this camera, but probably at least hundreds of people in some way contributed to the creation and the distribution of this camera. It had to go to a warehouse somewhere. I bought it on Amazon, so the people working on Amazon, maintaining the website, making sure it gets shipped to the right place, that it got shipped to America, then forwarded to me here in Armenia, so those people played a part in it too, right? So in the end, I paid probably $500, and somehow, because of that numerical accounting system, all those complicated processes happened in just the right way that I now have this camera. Do you think I could have built this camera myself, even with all the tools in the world?
No, that different.
Right, but somehow I have a camera, and all I had to do was give the number 500 to someone. $500, right? The number 500, an abstract concept, was taken away from my bank account and put into someone else's, and now somehow I have a camera. That's it. The money facilitated that very long, complex economic process, right?
Yeah. Actually, I cannot understand some concept because of my experience, like all the Iranians' experience, that we could lose every minute something because the currency in last 45 years is like going down with the high speed.
A currency is becoming less valuable, which means that it's less useful for exchanging for real value.
For example, I remember I could buy a house, normal apartment, for $1,000, and I had that money. I had more than that money, and I was like, no, let me, next year, and the next year was the sanctions with of Donald Trump. Actually, we are appreciative of the sanctions, but the sanctions changed that house, the price of that house, to 10,000 in one week, 1 month, kind of. For me, something that you are saying, it's like a not fancy idea, but in a stable economy. Like
How even the currency is stable.
not currency, yet kind of currency and everything, but with the country that you are selling something, and the next day after that, if you want to buy exactly that one, you need to pay 3 times more because of the.
It's called inflation, right? So if the Armenian government suddenly printed twice as many Armenian dram tomorrow and released them into the economy, what would that accomplish? What would happen? Nothing else changes. Suddenly tomorrow there's twice as many Armenian dram as there were today. What happens?
The price of the dram would be reduced by the half.
Right. The money would, because you haven't doubled the amount of wealth in the economy, you've just reduced the accounting system's ability to keep a consistent record of the numerical value of things. That's it. So money isn't this magical force where if you have a high number, it means you're rich. Again, that's an idiot's way to think about economics and wealth, but that's how most people think of it, right? Professional economists think that way. Politicians think that way. The people who make monetary policies and affect what we're allowed to produce in the economy or how much taxes we're paying on things, that's how they think. It's astounding. It's like living in a world where almost everybody still believes the earth is flat. And you try to make a really obvious argument that it's round, and you say, look, I can prove it. Like, isn't it obvious that can't you see that it's round? 99% of people still think it's flat.
No, and so I didn't get the fund. I want to get the point. So imagine you have $1,000 and we can buy a flat.
You have the number 1,000 in your bank account. Okay, that's what you have when you have it.
And you can buy a flat.
You can buy the flat, or you can rent it for a month, or what?
No, buy.
You can own an apartment for the number 1,000. Okay, the value of the apartment is the number 1,000.
Yeah, but tomorrow Immediately it's 5,000.
Okay, so the flat itself, the apartment has not changed. It's in the exact same material condition, right?
Yeah. Just your money.
Right.
Is 5 times less now.
So, well, there's another reason that could happen too. There's another reason why things could rapidly move up in price besides just there being more money and therefore the money being worse at its job. What if suddenly 5 times as many people want to move to New York as did the day before? What happens to the price of housing in New York? Why? Why does it go up?
Because big amount of people wants to buy.
But it's not enough for them. Like the things that exist is less than the people who wants to have it.
Yeah, there's a term for that in economics. Again, it's the foundation of economics. It's like understanding force and mass in physics, supply and demand. That's it. That affects every choice you ever make. You demand something, you perceive that you want something, that something will give you a state of satisfaction, right? That's your demand. I'm hungry. Oh, there's demand for food. Supply is what you perceive as your options for satisfying that demand. That's it. What do we have to eat? That's supply. I want to live in New York. What are my options for doing that? Well, there are only so many apartments or houses or condos or whatever in New York, right? Those are my options for living in New York. That's the supply. So I have to decide somehow out of all those apparent options how to satisfy my demand of living in New York. So if lots and lots of people all want the same thing, but there's still the same amount of options for that thing, they're competing for those options. They want it more and more. They're willing to pay more and more for it. That's why the price goes up. That's it. And then you're talking about hyperinflation.
Very fast.
When inflation happens so quickly that the currency basically becomes worthless, that you can't even use it anymore to buy and sell things.
Yeah.
Like you see those pictures of people with giant wheelbarrows full of German marks because they just kept printing more and more of them, so you needed a wheelbarrow to buy one loaf of bread, right?
Like we've got here a banknote of like trillion.
Yes, yeah, we have the 40 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, which I believe is the highest denomination of currency ever printed. That's an example of hyperinflation. Its current market value is about 40 cents in US dollars. It's 40 trillion of their dollars.
It's like nothing.
Right. So again, this is a fundamental mindset shift away from thinking about things in terms of currency, but instead of just the actual value they are, which doesn't necessarily mean just material, because like a loaf of bread is a material thing, obviously, but like what's the value of art? A painting on the wall. The painting is material, it exists, obviously. The paint and canvas had to go into creating it, but why would one painting be worth millions and another worth almost nothing? We have a
Commercials.
small stack of books here, including a few I've written. Self-promotion, shameless. My book about economics, Everyone is an Entrepreneur, Selling Economic Self-Determination in a Post-Soviet World, which has several chapters covering the exact same things we're talking about here. All of these books are very, very similar in a material sense. They're all made of paper and ink, primarily, right? Yes, some of these books will be very, very valuable for me to read, and others might be a complete waste of my time. But they're all materially almost identical. So like why might this book be one of the most valuable books you've ever read, and another might waste several hours of your life? What's the difference? They're just paper and ink.
Depends on your value, your interest.
Because particular arrangements of paper and ink will have different intellectual and emotional effects on you, right? Same thing with a painting, it's just paint and canvas, right? But the way one person arranges paint and canvas might have a profound emotional effect on you because it's the most beautiful fucking thing you've ever seen. And the way another person does might be worthless to you. Because you get no value from it whatsoever because it's in your head. It's emotional or it's intellectual. Reading this book might teach you things that will serve you for the rest of your life. And the same with that table can serve me for the rest of my life unless it breaks or falls apart through regular wear and tear, right? Information in the form of printed words on a page might cause you to make smarter choices for the rest of your life that helps you get more of what you want for as long as you remain alive. And it's just ink on paper, right? So might that book be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars to you in the long run if it teaches you things that are that valuable? Maybe. How much value have I derived from watching Star Wars throughout my life? Which, by the way, is the first movie I can ever remember seeing. And we're still watching it now, and I'm 36. Right? It's just sound and moving pictures. Right? That's solid, whether it was originally on VHS tapes or a Betamax, which was even a precursor to VHS, or DVD discs, or now just digital shit on a flash drive in my computer or something, right? It's all, the product is the same in the end. It's moving pictures and sound. That's it. That's every movie ever made. and the first ones didn't even have sound. They were silent pictures, silent movies. So they were just moving pictures. Sometimes text too on the screen. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, right? And yet, some arrangements of moving pictures and sound might be very, very boring or even offensive. We might hate them. Negative value, dissatisfaction, and some might change our lives. We might want to re-experience them over and over again. Right? So the value is not just in the materialness. A loaf of bread has a lot of material value because it has nutrition that keeps you alive, right? But there's also always more to it than that. Value is subjective, it's in your brain, and what you find valuable will always be different than what someone else does because nobody is exactly the same as you. The entire point of this is to start to think of how you spend your money in ways that give you the greatest possible long-term value. That's it. If you understand even that single concept, you will eventually be wealthier than the vast majority of people who have ever lived. How many Americans at 36 do you think own a house? We could look up the statistics, but I'm going to guess not very many. Less than 10%, I'm sure, maybe way less than that.
It's decreasing, right? I mean,
Well, I know the cost of housing tends to be going up, which means less people can afford it, right? Most people rent or they lease, like they're paying a mortgage, and after maybe 30 years, they might finally own the house, right?
there is a lot of jokes about it on the internet that everyone compared themselves in their 30s, for example, with their parents. Like their parents owned a house, a car, and all of that stuff. But many people right now didn't have that.
I believe most Americans are in debt. Again, I'd really like to look up the statistics when we publish this video, but I believe most Americans spend their entire lives having negative net worth. They have access to things that they're paying for on credit, essentially. They're borrowing from a bank or some financial institution, right? So if you have actual things you own, you are wealthier than them because they have none. No matter what it says on paper, no matter what number is in their bank account.
The point is not to be rich, is to be how to use the money for your values. But sometimes your values is like the minimum things that most of the people can have. But in your country, it's not possible. So, although you know all the things about the money and wealth, is like there is some parameters that you cannot handle them. Like the currency, what is the opposite of race?
Lowers, falls,
Falls
appreciates or depreciates.
5 times more in one night. So it means like all your company and your business is closed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Will my house be any different if the Armenian dram is suddenly worth a lot less tomorrow?
You know, you can survive because you have it
Because I have actual wealth, actually valuable things that are not affected by the accounting system because I already own them.
Yeah, but
Right.
if you have the money, the drum, but tomorrow you want
Yeah.
to buy it, but tomorrow is
Yeah.
more expensive. So all the things that you manage, the things that you didn't eat, the restaurant that you never went because you want to save the money, and the things that you invest your money in so you could have more money is
The accounting system, if that gets all fucked up, it will make it a lot harder for people to continue to exchange value, which we call buying and selling. But why do you think we're building a root cellar that I'm going to fill with food? Why do you think we have a large water storage tank that we're installing? Why do you think I bought an electrical generator? Why do I have a library full of interesting books with valuable knowledge? Why do I have all this? Why do I have a workshop full of tools? Why do I have a lot more clothing than I need to wear? I probably won't need to buy clothes again for at least 5 years. You've been in my room. I have more clothing than I know what to do with. It's like spilling out of the hangers in the wardrobe, right? I need to find a more efficient way to store it.
You want to be ready for the extreme situations.
Yeah, because I'm more concerned with having actual wealth, valuable things that I know I will need. That's wealth, things that are valuable. That's it. That's all of economics. The rest is an accounting system. And the people managing the accounting system are notoriously bad at it. Every country in the world is bad at managing its currency. Some are a lot worse than others. You're in one of the worst. Iran, you're from one of the worst.
not the worst. There is two countries after all.
Who's worse than you?
Afghanistan and Syria.
Okay.
Syria.
Yeah.
No, actually, now Syria is more than
What about the North Korea?
maybe. Like the currency in Iran is $128 per month, and it's like not. I don't know how it's working right now. Like with minimal price of milk and meat and everything, still it's not possible to live.
We can survive on the rabbits and the duck eggs if we have to. Well, at least a few of us could. Back to my earlier question, why are all of you able to live in my house without paying me anything? Is it just because I'm a nice guy and I like you all? That might be one reason I let someone stay in my house. When I bring a friend over, that's what I'm doing. Essentially, I like them. I want them to be in my house, right? But all of you were strangers when you first came here, certainly. Yet I agreed to let you come live in my house for free. Why did I do that? When I say for free, I mean not paying any currency, because it's not actually for free, is it?
Yeah.
Because you're providing value of some kind. If you agree to come here as a volunteer, we make an informal agreement that you will do valuable things, things that I consider valuable for me, in exchange for me allowing you to live in my house and eat my food. That's it. If you decided you'd rather pay me money, I might be fine with that too. If you don't want to have to work or do any of the things we agreed to, you say, yo, but I like living here though, Gregory. I like eating your food. How about I just pay you so many hundreds of dollars a month? I'd probably say, yeah, that's valuable to me. I could always use more currency. Currency is useful, right? That's just one way of providing value. When you rent an apartment from someone, that's all you're doing. They want something valuable from you in exchange for letting you live in their apartment.
Question. Me as a Iranian, definitely everything that you are saying makes sense. But what is wrong with Armenia?
Okay, so the whole premise of this book, my economics book, Everyone is an Entrepreneur, I'm talking about the Armenian and the post-Soviet mentality about money, about productivity, about making your own choices in the economy, because of course they're coming from the Soviet Union that ended 30 years ago, where almost all these kinds of decisions were made for them by the central government, the economic planners who told them what to produce, what to consume. So they never developed the brains the brain power, the brain muscles. So again, it's going to sound like I'm saying they're stupid, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying they never learned to exercise that part of their brain to make those types of choices, right? Because you've seen that many of the people here are not idiots. They're quite capable, quite competent, but they don't know how to think this way. They don't know how to think about these things because they spent their whole lives never having to. And in fact, they were punished if they tried to think this way. Economic crimes like speculation would get you sent to a labor camp. What is speculation? It's predicting that something will be valuable in the future. That's what speculation means. It was like one of the worst crimes you could commit in the Soviet Union, right? Yet it's everything I was just talking about. I predict that this table will be valuable for 50 years. That's why I bought it. I'm speculating. Oh no, someone arrest me. I'm a dangerous criminal on the loose.
So, but now they are not in that situation.
But they never learned how to think that way. Whereas for Americans and most Westerners, it's just kind of obvious.
Okay, but they don't need to learn how to think. You taught them. Don't think. Just do whatever I want.
They're still afraid, yeah, because they've been conditioned for generations that this is bad, you shouldn't do this. Money is evil. You should avoid using money whenever possible, right? That's how they think.
So what is your solution for this nation?
For most of these people, there's nothing I can do. For their kids, maybe. Because kids are still open-minded and they're not as conditioned. And if you can introduce them to new influences instead of just their parents telling them, you have to think this way, it's the way I think about things, then you can start to change things. You can think differently because you find this interesting, because you want to learn these things, right? So your life will be different because you're capable of acquiring new information and new habits. And you will go on to influence other people to have different thoughts and different habits. And those people will go on to influence other people and so on and so forth. When somebody living in Toronto spends $1,500, $1,500 a month renting an apartment, what's the value they're getting? What are they paying $1,500 for?
Living in Toronto.
They're getting a place to sleep and eat and relax for a month and getting a place to live for 1 month. What if I spend $1,500 a month on construction for my house, refurbishing my house, making it nicer, building new rooms and installing a water tank and an electrical generator and so forth? I spend at least that much on construction costs, right? But what's the value I'm getting? Is it just a place to continue sleeping for a month?
No, you have already.
I think the difference between these two things is that in the end of the month, that person from Toronto didn't have anything,
Yeah, their life is not any different, at least from that particular expense, right?
And
And I have a nicer house every month, right? You've been here less than a year, but you've seen that the house is already substantially improved in quality in the time you've been here, right? What do you think it was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I've been here 5 years.
Yeah.
What do you think the first year was like?
I know.
I saw the video.
We should like nothing.
And if you happen to be in a position where it is difficult for you to make or spend money, such as you are being Iranian, unfortunately, which is not your fault, it just means you need to understand these principles even better. The few opportunities that you have to make or spend money, you have to use as wisely as possible.
Yeah.
Don't waste the opportunity on stupid short-term bullshit.
Yeah. It's like everybody have 30 good opportunity in 100, but we have 3. But still we have some.
What do you think the average Armenian does if they suddenly get a big payday or something? They suddenly make a few $100s extra, which for them is a lot of money.
They just spend it.
Yeah, what do they spend it on? Beer? Gambling? Prostitutes? I don't know.
Poor man.
Recreation, essentially.
Because if you give a lot of money to the one who have a poor man thinking, you just spend it.
Yeah. Or even if it's like, not as cheap and shallow as those examples I just gave, but if it's like a nice dinner for all my friends. We bought a whole pig and killed it and had a big feast. Okay, that's great. That's commendable. You're socially bonding, you're building a sense of community. But at the end of the day, the feast is over, and now you have no money again. Your life is the same as it was before.
It's like you're just paying for emotions. Like you
Yeah.
do things like that. But it's not for a long term things. You will get good memories. Maybe.
And yes, and there is legitimate value to those. If those stick with you your whole life, memories of bonding with people who matter to you, your family, your friends, whatever. Again, I'm not trying to totally denigrate all forms of recreation, but there's a limit to that, right?
To spend money on some useful things.
And all of this just seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? Like, did you really need me to explain this to you? Couldn't you have just like thought about this and figured that out yourself?
No, it makes sense actually.
So, to learn more of some of the most valuable information you can have that might go on to positively affect all the choices you make for the rest of your life in just about 300 pages and $20, why not make the investment of your time and money in this lovely book that will explain economics to you better than several years of university courses on the subject, which is real feedback I have gotten from more than one reader, that they learned more in this book than they did in years and years of economics classes in prestigious universities. Everyone is an entrepreneur. Selling Economic Self-Determination in a Post-Soviet World by Gregory V. Deal. That's me.